When my daughter told me to find somewhere else to die, that I was useless now, I packed my bags like the obedient mother I'd always been. 3 days later, I was sitting in a lawyer's office, discovering that my supposedly loving husband had played the longest game of chess in history. Rachel was about to learn that sometimes the pawn becomes the queen. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Let me tell you how I went from homeless widow to the woman holding all the cards. Because, honey, this story has more twists than a pretzel factory. 2 months ago, I was Charlotte Banks, devoted wife of 43 years and mother to one spectacularly ungrateful daughter. When Andrew died of a heart attack at 71, I thought my world was ending. The funeral was a blur of black clothes and sympathetic murmurs. I moved through it like a ghost, clinging to my daughter Rachel's arm as mourners filed past to offer condolences. "You're so strong, Charlotte," they'd say, squeezing my hand. But I wasn't strong. I was hollow. Andrew and I had met in college, him studying law, me pursuing an English degree I never finished. We married 6 months after graduation. While he built his prestigious legal career, I built our home. I arranged dinner parties for his colleagues, raised our daughter, volunteered for the charities that mattered to his firm. I was the perfect corporate wife. Behind every successful man, Andrew used to say, kissing my cheek, is a woman who makes success possible. I'd accepted the compliment, never questioning if I wanted more. After the funeral, I couldn't bear to sleep in our bedroom. The king-sized bed where Andrew had slept beside me for 4 decades felt cavernous, cold. I moved into the guest room, telling myself it was temporary until the grief subsided. Rachel visited often those first few weeks. My beautiful daughter with her designer clothes and perfect hair, so much like her father, ambitious, driven, always moving forward. She'd married Marcus Williams 5 years ago, an investment banker with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. They had given us 2 beautiful grandchildren, Emma and Liam, who rarely visited because Grandma's house isn't childproof. "Mom, you look exhausted," Rachel said one morning, watching me pour coffee with shaking hands. "Have you been sleeping?" "Not much," I admitted. "The house feels so empty." She exchanged a look with Marcus, who was scrolling through his phone at the kitchen table. "That's what we wanted to talk to you about." I should have seen it coming. The sympathetic tilt of her head. The way Marcus suddenly paid attention, setting his phone down like we were having a business meeting. "Mom, you can't possibly manage this big house alone," Rachel said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "The stairs, the maintenance, all those memories. It's not healthy." I should have seen the calculation behind her concern. But grief had clouded my judgment. I just nodded, grateful that my daughter seemed to care. If only I'd known what was really happening. Rachel had always been Andrew's favorite, his little princess who could do no wrong. When she married Marcus and started producing grandchildren, Andrew doted on them all. Meanwhile, I was just the woman who cooked and cleaned and kept everything running smoothly. After the funeral, Rachel became increasingly insistent about my situation. She'd bring Marcus over for family dinners where they'd corner me with real estate pamphlets and retirement community brochures. "Mom, these places are wonderful," she'd say, spreading glossy pages across the dining table Andrew and I had shared thousands of meals at. "You'd have people your own age, activities, no responsibilities." What they meant was no inheritance to split, no inconvenient mother to deal with. "Look at this one," Marcus would chime in, pointing to a facility that looked more like a hospital than a home. "They have medical staff on site 24/7. That's peace of mind." Peace of mind for whom I wondered, but kept silent. I'd spent a lifetime keeping the peace. One afternoon, I found Rachel in Andrew's study, going through his desk drawers. "What are you doing?" I asked, startling her. She straightened quickly, closing the drawer. "Just looking for Dad's fountain pen. I thought it would be nice to have something of his at my desk." I nodded, though something felt off. That night, after they left, I went to the study myself. The drawer was neat, but different. Andrew had always arranged his papers at perfect right angles. Now they were slightly askew. I began to look through them, finding bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds, amounts with more zeros than I'd ever seen. Had Andrew really accumulated this much, he'd always handled our finances, giving me a monthly allowance for household expenses. "Don't worry your pretty head about money," he'd say whenever I asked questions. Among the papers, I found a sealed envelope with my name written in Andrew's precise handwriting. Inside was a letter dated 6 months before his death. "My dearest Charlotte, if you're reading this, I'm no longer with you. I've asked Harrison to give you this after the reading of the will, but knowing you, you've probably found it on your own. You were always more observant than I gave you credit for. There are things about our finances you should know. I've built more wealth than I've let on, substantially more, but I've also made enemies along the way, people who wouldn't hesitate to use those close to me as leverage. Be careful who you trust, especially with knowledge of our assets. Even family can change when money is involved. I've arranged everything with Harrison. He'll explain the details when the time is right. All my love." Andrew, I sat in Andrew's leather chair, letter trembling in my hands. What enemies, what assets, and who was Harrison before I could investigate further? I heard the front door open. Rachel's voice called out, "Mom, we brought dinner." I quickly returned the letter to its envelope and slipped it into my pocket. Something told me this wasn't information I should share with my daughter. Not yet. Anyway, as the weeks passed, I began to notice changes in my home. Small things at first, Rachel rearranging furniture to make things safer, Marcus installing a new security system for your protection, both of them suggesting I shouldn't drive anymore because your reflexes aren't what they used to be. I found myself saying yes to everything. Yes to Rachel sorting through Andrew's clothes. Yes to Marcus updating the house insurance. Yes to their suggestion that I give them spare keys in case of emergency. I was shrinking, becoming smaller in my own home, but I couldn't stop it. Grief had hollowed me out, leaving a shell that moved through rooms that felt increasingly unfamiliar. The final blow came one evening when I discovered Rachel and Marcus in the master bedroom, my bedroom measuring the walls. "What are you doing?" I asked. Rachel turned, not even embarrassed at being caught. "Just seeing if our bedroom set would fit in here. The dimensions seem about right." "Your bedroom set, Mom," Rachel said with that patient tone she'd been using more and more. "We've been talking about this for weeks. This house is too big for you alone. Marcus and I need a bigger place now that Emma's starting school. It makes perfect sense for us to move in." "Move in," I repeated, feeling dizzy. "But where would I—" "There are some wonderful senior apartments near us," Marcus interjected smoothly. "Very affordable. You'd have your own space, but be close enough to see the grandkids regularly." They'd been planning this all along. I realized. The pamphlets, the concerned discussions, the slow takeover of my home. It had all been leading to this moment. "I need to think about it," I said, backing out of the room that still held Andrew's presence in every corner. That night, I couldn't sleep. I took out Andrew's letter again, reading it over and over. Be careful who you trust, especially with family. Had he known this would happen, had he anticipated his own daughter's betrayal, I needed to find this Harrison person. And I needed to do it soon. The final blow came last Tuesday. I'd been living in what Rachel now called our house for 6 weeks since Andrew's death, still sleeping in the guest room because I couldn't bear to pack up our bedroom. Rachel arrived unannounced with Marcus and 2 large suitcases. Emma and Liam trailed behind them, already running toward the room we'd set up for their occasional overnight stays. "Mom, we've made a decision," Rachel announced, setting her designer handbag on the entryway table with the authority of someone who already owned the place. "Marcus got the promotion, and we need to move into town immediately. This house is perfect for us." I stared at her, not quite comprehending. "Move in, but this is my home." Rachel's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold calculation underneath. "Actually, Mom, according to Dad's will, I inherited everything. The house, the investments, all of it. I've been letting you stay here out of kindness, but it's time for you to find your own place." The words hit me like a physical blow. I grabbed the wall to steady myself. "Victoria, surely there's been some mistake." "No mistake." Her voice was ice now. All pretense of concern evaporated. "Dad knew I'd take better care of his legacy than you ever could. You never understood money or investments. You were just the wife. just the wife. 43 years reduced to those 3 words. Marcus was already heading upstairs with the suitcases. I could hear the children arguing over which bedroom would be theirs. "There must be a copy of the will," I said, moving toward Andrew's study. "I need to see it for myself." Rachel blocked my path. "It's all legal. Mom, I've already been through everything with the lawyers. Dad left me as executor with full control." She pulled a document from her purse and held it out. "Here's a copy of the relevant section. You can see for yourself." The paper trembled in my hands as I read. It certainly looked official, with legal terminology I didn't fully understand and what appeared to be Andrew's signature at the bottom. According to this document, Rachel inherited everything, with a small monthly stipend set aside for my basic needs. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Your father wouldn't do this." That's when she delivered the killing blow. "Find somewhere else to die. You're useless now." Her words echoed in the foyer of the home I'd created, maintained, and filled with love for over 4 decades. I looked at my daughter, this stranger wearing Rachel's face, and for the first time, I saw Andrew's ambition without his occasional kindness, his drive without his underlying principles. "How long do I have?" My voice sounded distant, even to myself. "We need to get settled before Emma starts her new school next week," Marcus said, coming back downstairs. "So ideally, by tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" I felt the room spin. "I need to pack 40 years of life into one day." Rachel checked her watch impatiently. "We've arranged a room for you at the Sunset Inn until you find something permanent. It's paid through the week." A week! My daughter was giving me a week to rebuild my life from scratch. I packed my things in a daze. 43 years of marriage fitting into 2 suitcases and a small box of photos. Rachel watched from the doorway, checking her watch like I was making her late for something important. "There's a nice senior complex on Maple Street," she offered with the enthusiasm of someone recommending a decent restaurant. "Very affordable. I'm sure they have openings." Affordable. My daughter was inheriting what she claimed was Andrew's entire estate, and she was suggesting I check into what was essentially a welfare facility for the elderly. Marcus loaded my suitcases into their BMW with the efficiency of someone disposing of garbage. "Charlotte, you'll love having your independence again," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "No more worrying about house maintenance or property taxes. No more home," he meant. As we drove away, I watched my house, Andrew's house, Rachel's house, now disappear in the rearview mirror. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent 4 decades making that house a home, hosting Rachel's birthday parties, nursing Andrew through his illness, maintaining every detail he cared about. Now I was being driven to a budget motel like an unwanted guest who'd overstayed her welcome. The Sunset Inn was exactly what you'd expect from a place charging $49 a night. Thin walls, thinner towels, and a carpet that had seen better decades. Rachel handed me $200 in cash like she was tipping a hotel maid. "This should cover you for a few days while you get settled," she said. "I'll have Marcus transfer some money into your account once we sort through Dad's paperwork. Some money from my own inheritance." After they left, I sat on the sagging mattress and tried to process what had just happened. In the span of 3 hours, I'd gone from grieving widow to homeless senior citizen. The woman I'd raised, loved, and sacrificed for had discarded me like an expired prescription. But as I sat there in that depressing motel room, something began nagging at me. Andrew had always been meticulous about his affairs, obsessively organized about important documents. He'd shown me the will years ago, explaining his wishes, making sure I understood everything, and I was absolutely certain that's not what it had said. The letter in my pocket seemed to burn against my skin. Be careful who you trust, especially with family. Andrew had been warning me, and he'd mentioned someone named Harrison who would explain everything. I needed to find Harrison, but first, I needed to survive the night in this depressing motel room, with $200 to my name and a lifetime of regrets keeping me company. The next morning, I used the motel's patchy Wi-Fi to search for information about Andrew's attorney. I vaguely remembered the name Harrison Porter from documents Andrew had me sign over the years. A quick search showed his office was downtown, a 20-minute bus ride that would cost me precious cash from my dwindling supply. But it felt necessary. Before leaving, I tucked Andrew's letter carefully into my purse, along with the copy of the will Rachel had given me. Something wasn't right, and I needed answers. The bus was crowded with morning commuters. I felt invisible among them, just another old woman clutching her purse, taking up space in their busy world. Had I always been invisible? Even to Andrew. To Rachel, the thought stung more than I wanted to admit. Harrison Porter's office was in a sleek downtown building with a lobby that smelled of money and power. The receptionist, a young woman with immaculate nails and a professional smile, looked skeptical when I approached without an appointment. "Mr. Porter is extremely busy today," she informed me. "Perhaps you could call to schedule something next week. Next week might as well be next century." I straightened my shoulders, channeling the confidence I'd seen Andrew use countless times. "Please tell Mr. Porter that Charlotte Banks is here regarding Andrew Banks' estate. I believe he'll want to see me immediately." The mention of Andrew's name worked like magic. Within minutes, I was ushered into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Harrison Porter was a distinguished man in his 70s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and silver hair that spoke of experience rather than age. When his secretary announced, "Mrs. Banks is here about her husband's estate," he looked genuinely surprised. "Charlotte, my dear." He stood, coming around his massive desk to take my hands. "I was wondering when you'd come in. I tried calling your house several times, but Rachel said you were traveling." Traveling. That's what my daughter had told him. "Mr. Porter, I need to ask you about Andrew's will." He looked puzzled. "Of course. Didn't Rachel provide you with your copy? I gave her the original and several copies after the reading." My stomach dropped. "There was a reading?" Harrison's brow furrowed. "Yes, 2 weeks after the funeral. You were supposed to be there." "I was never told about any reading," I said, my voice barely steady. "Rachel told me she inherited everything." She showed me this. I handed him the document Rachel had given me. Harrison examined it, his expression shifting from confusion to alarm. He reached for a thick file folder on his desk, his movements suddenly urgent. "Charlotte, that's impossible. Your husband's will is very specific about your inheritance." He pulled out a document. I recognized Andrew's neat signature at the bottom, witnessed and notarized. But as Harrison began reading, I realized Rachel had lied about everything. "I, Andrew James Banks, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath to my beloved wife, Charlotte Ann Banks, the following our primary residence at 847 Oakwood Drive, including all furnishings and personal effects. Additionally, I leave her 70% of all financial assets, investments, and accounts totaling approximately $23 million. My head started spinning. $23 million. The house, 70% of everything. Harrison continued reading, his voice growing more serious. "To my daughter, Rachel Banks Williams, I leave $10 million to be held in trust with distributions beginning on her 45th birthday, contingent upon her treatment of her mother following my death, contingent upon her treatment of me." Andrew had known. Somehow he'd known exactly what Rachel would try to do. "Mr. Porter," I whispered. "Rachel told me I inherited nothing. She moved into my house yesterday. She gave me $200 and suggested I find a senior facility." The elderly lawyer's face flushed with anger. "Charlotte, what Rachel has done is called elder abuse and fraud. She's committed multiple felonies." "But she had legal documents," I said, pointing to the paper I'd brought. "Forged, most likely, or documents from an earlier draft. Your husband updated his will 6 months before his death, specifically because he was concerned about Rachel's attitude toward money and her sense of entitlement." The room was spinning. All those times Rachel had dismissed my opinions, talked over me during family dinners, rolled her eyes when I tried to contribute to conversations about their expensive vacations or Marcus's business deals. Andrew had been watching, evaluating, making decisions. "There's more, Charlotte." Harrison's voice pulled me back to the present. He was pointing to another section of the will. "The trust provision for Rachel specifically states that if she fails to treat you with respect and dignity following Andrew's death, the entire $10 million reverts to you instead." I stared at him in shock. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying your daughter just cost herself $10 million. Her inheritance is now yours as well. You're not inheriting $23 million. Charlotte, you're inheriting $33 million plus the house and all personal property. The irony was so perfect it was almost funny. Rachel had been so eager to claim her inheritance that she'd triggered the exact clause designed to protect me from her greed. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice barely steady. Harrison smiled, and for the first time since Andrew's death, I saw genuine warmth directed at me. "Now, my dear, we call the police about the fraud, and then we call Rachel and inform her that she's about to receive the shock of her life." "Can she fight this? With what money?" His smile turned grim. "She's about to discover that every account she thought she controlled actually belongs to you. Every investment, every bank account, every asset except your house is frozen pending investigation of her fraudulent activities." I thought about Rachel in my house, probably already planning renovations, shopping for new furniture with money she thought was hers. Marcus was probably calculating how the inheritance would affect his investment portfolio. They had no idea that in about 6 hours, their entire world was going to implode. Harrison Porter's office became command central for what he cheerfully called Operation Justice. He contacted the police, the banks, and a private investigator while I sat in his leather chair, still processing the magnitude of Rachel's deception. "The forged documents are quite sophisticated," Detective Elena Rodriguez explained as she reviewed the fake will Rachel had shown me. "This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime. Someone planned this carefully." "You think Rachel had help?" I asked. "Almost certainly. Creating convincing legal forgeries requires specific knowledge and connections. We'll need to investigate whether Marcus or someone in his financial network was involved." Within 2 hours, every account had been frozen. Rachel's credit cards linked to what she thought were her new inheritance accounts would be declined. The house utilities, which she'd already transferred to her name, were suspended pending ownership verification. My phone rang at exactly 3:47 p.m. Rachel's name flashed on the screen. "Mom, where are you? There's some kind of mix-up with the bank accounts. They're saying Dad's assets are frozen." "Hello, Rachel," I said calmly, my hand steady for the first time in weeks. "I'm sitting in Harrison Porter's office. You remember him, Daddy's attorney? The one who read the real will to an empty room while you told him I was traveling?" Silence. Then Mom, "I don't know what you think you've discovered, but I discovered that you're a liar and a thief, sweetheart." The endearment felt bitter on my tongue. "I also discovered that your father was much smarter than either of us realized." "You don't understand," she said quickly, her voice rising. "I was protecting you from the complexity of managing all that money. You've never had to deal with investments or... I understand perfectly. You forged legal documents, committed fraud, and threw your 67-year-old mother out of her own house because you thought I was too stupid to notice." Her voice turned sharp, desperate. "Mom, you're confused. The grief has been overwhelming, and someone is obviously taking advantage of your emotional state." The audacity was breathtaking, even caught red-handed. Rachel was trying to manipulate me. "Rachel, dear, let me clarify something for you," I said, my voice like steel. "Not only did you never inherit anything, but your actual inheritance, the $10 million your father left you, is now mine as well, thanks to a lovely clause he included about treating me with dignity and respect." "That's impossible." Her voice had lost its confidence now. "Detective Rodriguez is sitting right here if you'd like to discuss the impossibility of fraud charges with her." The phone went quiet. I could almost hear Rachel's mind racing, calculating, searching for an angle. "Mom, please, can we meet somewhere and talk about this reasonably? I'm sure we can work something out." "Oh, we'll definitely be meeting soon at the courthouse when you're arraigned. You wouldn't dare press charges against your own daughter." Her voice was a mix of threat and plea. Something cold and final crystallized in my chest. "Watch me." I hung up and looked at Harrison, who was beaming with approval. "How long before she's arrested?" "Detective Rodriguez has enough evidence for a warrant. They'll pick her up this evening, and Marcus, his financial records are being subpoenaed. If he participated in creating those documents, he'll face charges, too." My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel Mom. "Please don't do this. Think about the grandchildren." I showed the message to Detective Rodriguez, who smiled grimly. "Emotional manipulation. Classic behavior pattern for this type of crime. I typed back. I am thinking about them. They deserve to see what happens when you steal from family. As Detective Rodriguez left to execute the warrant, Harrison patted my hand. Charlotte, there's something else Andrew wanted you to know. He left a video message to be played if Rachel ever contested the will or if she treated you poorly after his death. Would you like to see it? I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. Harrison turned his laptop toward me and pressed play. Andrew's face filled the screen, not the frail man of his final days, but the strong, vibrant man I'd loved for decades. His eyes were clear, his voice steady. Charlotte, my love, if you're watching this, then Rachel has done exactly what I feared she might. I've watched her growing sense of entitlement with increasing concern, the way she dismisses your opinions, the way she assumes she knows better than you about everything. It reminds me too much of how my father treated my mother. And I won't let that happen to you. Tears filled my eyes as he continued. I've arranged everything with Harrison. The house is yours. The majority of our assets are yours. And if Rachel has behaved as poorly as I fear she might, then her inheritance will become yours as well. You've earned every penny of it, Charlotte. Not just by being my wife, but by being the heart and soul of our family, the foundation that made everything else possible. He paused, his expression softening. I know you think I never noticed all you did, all you sacrificed, but I did notice. Charlotte. And I'm sorry I didn't tell you more often how much it meant to me. How much you meant to me. As the video ended, I wiped away tears. All these years, I'd thought Andrew saw me as just the wife, just the support system for his success, but he'd really seen me all along. Your husband was a remarkable man, Harrison said softly. Yes, I agreed, feeling stronger than I had in months. And it's time for me to be remarkable too. That evening, as I checked into a proper hotel with a credit card Harrison had arranged for me, I received a text from Detective Rodriguez Rachel and Marcus Williams in custody. Arraignment tomorrow at 9 a.m. Would you like to be present? I replied without hesitation. I'll be there. For the first time since Andrew died. I slept soundly, dreaming not of the past but of the future, a future where I was no longer invisible, no longer just the wife, a future where I held all the cards. Rachel was about to learn that sometimes the pawn becomes the queen. Harrison Porter's office hummed with activity the morning after Rachel and Marcus's arrest. The distinguished attorney had assembled what he called my recovery team, Detective Elena Rodriguez, financial investigator Carol Chen, and a sharp-eyed young lawyer named Michael Dawson who specialized in elder abuse cases. The arraignment is at 9, Harrison explained as his assistant poured coffee for everyone. Rachel and Marcus spent the night in county lockup. Their attorney has already called twice, fishing for a deal. What kind of deal, I asked, surprised they'd move so quickly. Carol Chen, a petite woman with steel-gray hair and calculating eyes, smiled thinly. The kind desperate people make when they realize they're in serious trouble. They want to avoid jail time. I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug, drawing strength from its warmth. What happens at the arraignment? They'll enter their plea, Michael explained. My guess is they'll go with not guilty, despite the overwhelming evidence. Their attorney will request bail, which the judge will likely grant but set quite high given the amount of money involved. And after that, Harrison said, leaning forward. We negotiate from a position of absolute strength. But Charlotte, there's something you need to decide first. I looked at him questioningly. How far do you want to take this? We can push for maximum penalties. They're looking at potential felony charges that carry significant prison time, or we can work toward a settlement that protects your assets but might involve reduced charges. The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on exposing Rachel's betrayal that I hadn't thought about what came after. Did I want my only child to go to prison? The grandchildren I loved to be without their mother. But then I remembered Rachel's cold voice. Find somewhere else to die. You're useless now. I want justice, I said finally. But I also want to be strategic. What would Andrew do? Harrison smiled approvingly. Andrew would protect what matters most while ensuring there were consequences for actions. The question is, what matters most to you? Charlotte. I thought about Emma and Liam. innocent in all this. I thought about the family photos still hanging in the house Rachel had tried to steal. I thought about the decades of memories embedded in those walls. I want my home back immediately, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. I want my financial independence secured. I want Rachel and Marcus to face real consequences for what they did. And I want to ensure my grandchildren don't suffer unnecessarily for their parents' crimes. Harrison nodded, making notes. We can work with that, Michael. Arrange for a court order to remove Rachel and Marcus from Charlotte's property today. Carol, prepare a complete accounting of all assets and flag any suspicious transactions since Andrew's death. Detective Rodriguez, what about the forgery investigation? Elena flipped through her notes. We've traced the forged documents to a print shop owned by James Whitaker, a college friend of Marcus's. He's already talking, eager to make a deal. Says Marcus paid him $50,000 to create the forgeries, with promises of more once they came into their inheritance. The methodical planning, the violation of trust, it was almost too much to comprehend. My own daughter had been plotting to steal my home and inheritance for weeks, maybe months. One more thing, Harrison said, checking his watch. The court order will allow you to return home today, Charlotte, but I'd like Detective Rodriguez to accompany you. There's no telling what state Rachel and Marcus left things in, especially once they realized their plan was falling apart. 2 hours later, I stood on the sidewalk outside my home watching as a police officer placed an eviction notice on the front door. Detective Rodriguez stood beside me, a reassuring presence in her crisp suit and sensible shoes. Are you ready for this? She asked gently. Was I ready to reclaim the home that had been stolen from me, to see what Rachel had done to the space Andrew and I had created together? No. But I needed to do it anyway. As ready as I'll ever be, I replied, straightening my shoulders. We approached the door just as it swung open. Rachel stood there, still in yesterday's clothes, her perfect hair disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed. Behind her, Marcus was frantically shoving papers into a briefcase. Mom, Rachel said, her voice cracking. What is this? We have a temporary restraining order against us. It's called an emergency eviction, Detective Rodriguez explained calmly. You're occupying this property illegally. You have 1 hour to collect essential personal items only. The rest can be arranged for pickup later. This is ridiculous, Marcus snapped, stalking toward us. Our attorney will have this overturned by noon. Your attorney, she said, finding my voice, is currently explaining to the district attorney why he shouldn't be disbarred for submitting fraudulent documents to the court. I wouldn't count on much help from that quarter. Rachel's eyes widened. Mom, please, we can talk about this. There's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, I interrupted, was my belief that I raised a daughter who wouldn't steal from her own mother. Rachel flinched as if I'd slapped her. Good. Let her feel a fraction of the pain she'd caused me. 1 hour? Detective Rodriguez repeated firmly. I'll be staying to ensure compliance with the court order. As Rachel and Marcus hastily packed suitcases upstairs, I walked through my home, surveying the changes they'd already made in the short time they'd occupied it. Rachel had removed the family photos from the mantel, replacing them with sleek modern art that meant nothing to me. Andrew's leather recliner, the one I'd sometimes sit in just to feel close to him, was gone. A geometric side table in its place. In the master bedroom, Rachel had already cleared out Andrew's closet, his suits, his favorite sweaters, the watch collection he'd been so proud of all gone. I felt a fresh wave of grief, not just for Andrew, but for the mementos of him I'd never get back. Where are Andrew's things? I asked when Rachel entered the room to pack her makeup. She avoided my eyes. We donated most of it. The suits went to that charity for unemployed men looking for jobs. At least there was that small mercy Andrew's clothes would help someone else. But the casual way she'd disposed of her father's possessions, the things I might have wanted to keep to remember him by, spoke volumes about her priorities. In Andrew's study, my study now Marcus was frantically sifting through the desk drawers. Looking for something, I asked from the doorway. He jumped, slamming the drawer shut. Just making sure I didn't leave any personal papers behind. Detective Rodriguez appeared behind me. Mr. Williams, Remember that you're only permitted to take personal items. Any financial documents or papers belonging to the estate must remain in the house." Marcus's jaw tightened, but he stepped away from the desk. "Fine. I'm done here anyway." As the hour drew to a close, Rachel made one last appeal. "Mom, think about what you're doing. We're family. This isn't how families treat each other." The irony of her statement would have been comical if it weren't so painful. "You're right, Rachel. Family doesn't forge documents to steal inheritances. Family doesn't throw an elderly mother out of her home with 200 and directions to the nearest budget motel. Family doesn't tell their mother to find somewhere else to die." Rachel paled at hearing her own words repeated back to her. "I was upset. I didn't mean it." "Yes, you did," I said softly. "That's the worst part. You meant every word. Now please leave my house." As Detective Rodriguez escorted them out, I watched from the window as they loaded their hastily packed bags into their luxury SUV. The grandchildren weren't with them, probably at school, blissfully unaware of their parents' crimes. Once they were gone, the house felt suddenly, wonderfully empty. I walked through each room, reclaiming it with my presence. In the kitchen, I found Rachel's half-drunk smoothie on the counter, evidence of how quickly their world had unraveled. In the living room, shopping bags from expensive boutiques were piled in the corner, tags still attached to dresses and shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Detective Rodriguez finished her inspection of the property and joined me in the kitchen. "They're gone, Mrs. Banks. The locks have been changed as ordered by the court. Is there someone who can stay with you tonight? A friend, perhaps?" I shook my head. Most of my friends were really Andrew's colleagues' wives, women who'd drifted away after his death. "I'll be fine on my own." She looked concerned. "Mrs. Banks, Charlotte, they might be angry enough to try something foolish. I'd feel better if you weren't alone." "I'll stay," a voice said from the doorway. I turned to see Harrison Porter, looking dapper as ever in his tailored suit. "I've taken the liberty of having my assistant book a security service. They'll have someone posted outside until we're certain Rachel and Marcus have accepted the new reality." I felt a rush of gratitude for this man who'd been Andrew's friend and was now becoming mine. "Thank you, Harrison." After Detective Rodriguez left, Harrison helped me put the house back in order. We rehung the family photos Rachel had taken down, moved furniture back to its proper place, and ordered dinner from my favorite Italian restaurant, a small celebration of reclaiming my home. "To Andrew," Harrison said, raising a glass of wine once we were settled in the dining room. "He would be proud of how you've handled all this." "Would he?" I wondered aloud. "I'm having his only daughter arrested." Harrison's expression grew serious. "Andrew valued justice. Charlotte, that's why he became a lawyer. He also knew Rachel better than you think. Why do you imagine he put that clause in the will about her treatment of you?" I sighed, turning the wineglass in my hands. "I keep wondering where we went wrong with her. Was she always this way? And I just didn't see it. Or did something change her?" "People make their own choices," Harrison said gently. "Rachel chose greed over decency. That's not your failure. It's hers." As we finished dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from Detective Rodriguez. "Rachel and Marcus made bail, $250,000 each. They're required to surrender passports and remain in the county." Harrison read the message over my shoulder. "That's expected. Now the real negotiations begin." "What do you think they'll do? They'll try to salvage what they can. Offer a plea deal to avoid prison time. Attempt to paint you as a confused elderly woman who misunderstood their intentions." He smiled grimly. "They're in for a rude awakening when they realize who they're dealing with." That night, after Harrison left, I slept in my own bed for the first time since Andrew's death. The sheets still smelled faintly of his cologne. Rachel hadn't had time to change them yet. I clutched his pillow to my chest and finally allowed myself to cry, not just for Andrew, but for the daughter I'd lost too. The daughter who'd seen me as nothing more than an obstacle to wealth. In the morning, I woke with new resolve. This was my home, my life, and I was reclaiming it piece by piece. The next morning, my phone rang just after 8. Rachel's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello, Rachel? Mom?" Her voice was ragged, like she'd been crying. "We need to talk." We're past talking. Don't you think, please, she said, a note of desperation creeping in. Not over the phone. Can we meet somewhere? Just you and me? Every instinct warned against this. But part of me, the mother part that never quite gives up, wanted to hear what she had to say. Harrison's office, 11 o'clock. No lawyers, she countered quickly. Just us. The cafe on Maple Street. Public place, neutral ground. Maybe this was worth hearing. Fine, 10:30. I called Harrison immediately after hanging up. Rachel wants to meet. Just the two of us. His concern was immediate. I don't think that's wise. Charlotte. She could be trying to manipulate you. Or worse, get you to say something they can use against you. I know, I admitted. But she's still my daughter. I need to at least hear what she has to say. Harrison sighed. I can't stop you. But I'm sending Michael to sit at a nearby table. He won't interfere unless necessary. The Maple Street Cafe was moderately busy when I arrived. Late morning coffee seekers and remote workers with laptops. I spotted Michael at a corner table, pretending to work but clearly watching the door. I nodded slightly in acknowledgement and chose a table near the window. Rachel arrived 5 minutes late, looking nothing like the polished, confident woman I was used to. Her hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, her face bare of makeup, dark circles under her eyes. She wore jeans and a simple sweater clothes I hadn't seen her in for years. Mom, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. Thank you for coming. I didn't respond, just waited for whatever performance she'd prepared. I know you're angry, she began, fidgeting with a sugar packet. You have every right to be, but there's more to this situation than you know. Enlighten me, I said, keeping my voice level. Dad wasn't who you thought he was. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. His business dealings weren't always clean. The money he left, a lot of it came from questionable sources. I felt a chill. Was she making this up? Or did she know something I didn't? What are you talking about? Rachel glanced around nervously. Dad worked with some dangerous people. Mom, people who laundered money through his firm. Marcus discovered it when he was helping me sort through Dad's papers after the funeral. We were trying to protect you. By stealing my inheritance and throwing me out of my home, I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. By taking control of the money before it could be traced back to its sources, she insisted. If the authorities start investigating Dad's finances, everything could be seized. We were going to keep you comfortable, take care of you, but keep the money moving so it wouldn't be frozen. It was an elaborate lie, or at least, I thought it was. But something in her eyes made me uneasy. Could Andrew have been involved in something illegal? It seemed impossible, and yet... Why didn't you just tell me this? I asked. Would you have believed me? You always saw Dad as perfect. She had a point there. I had idealized Andrew, especially after his death. Even if what you're saying is true, I countered, that doesn't justify fraud. Rachel, you could have come to me, explained your concerns. Instead, you forged documents and treated me like I was nothing. I was trying to protect our family, she insisted, tears welling in her eyes. Marcus has connections who can hide the money, make it look legitimate. But we needed to act fast. And telling me to find somewhere else to die, was that part of your protection plan? She flinched. I was angry. You weren't cooperating. And I said terrible things. I'm sorry. Mom, truly sorry. For a moment, I almost believed her. Almost. Rachel, if you're so concerned about illegal money, why are you still trying to get your hands on it? Why not report these concerns to the authorities? She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw the truth. Whatever Andrew might or might not have been involved in, Rachel's primary concern was the money itself. It's not that simple, she said finally. Actually, it is. If you genuinely believed Andrew's money was from illegal sources, you'd have reported it. Instead, you tried to steal it. I stood up, gathering my purse. This meeting is over. Mom, wait. Rachel grabbed my arm. You don't understand what you're dealing with. There are people who will come looking for this money. People Dad owed? Then I suggest you tell your attorney everything you know, I said, pulling away from her grasp. Because right now, the only people I'm worried about are you and Marcus. As I walked away, Rachel called after me. We were trying to help you. You'll see I'm right. Outside, Michael fell into step beside me. That seemed intense. She's claiming Andrew was involved in money laundering or something similar, I said, still shaken by the encounter. That they were trying to protect the money from being seized. Michael frowned. It's a creative defense strategy, I'll give them that. Trying to make their theft look altruistic. Could there be any truth to it? We should investigate, just to be sure. But honestly, it sounds like they're getting desperate. He opened the car door for me. Let's get you back to Harrison's office. He'll want to hear about this. 20 minutes later, I was recounting the conversation to Harrison, who listened with increasing concern. This is a troubling development, he said when I finished. Not because I believe Andrew was involved in anything illegal. I knew him for 30 years. And he was scrupulously ethical, but because this suggests Rachel and Marcus are preparing to get very ugly with their defense. You think they'll publicly accuse Andrew of criminal activity? Harrison nodded grimly. It's a classic dead man can't defend himself strategy. They're hoping to muddy the waters enough to create reasonable doubt about their own crimes. But would that work? It might reduce their sentence if they can convince a jury they were acting out of genuine concern. More worryingly, it could lead to an investigation of Andrew's estate, which would delay your access to the funds. I felt sick at the thought of Rachel dragging her father's reputation through the mud to save herself. What do? We get ahead of this, Harrison said decisively. Carol Chen is already conducting a thorough audit of Andrew's finances. If there's anything irregular, we'll find it first and deal with it appropriately. In the meantime, we proceed as planned with the criminal case against Rachel and Marcus. My phone rang Marcus this time. I showed Harrison the screen. Put it on speaker, he advised. Hello, Marcus, I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. Charlotte. His tone was all business, none of Rachel's emotional pleading. We need to discuss a settlement. I'm with my attorney, and you're on speaker, I informed him. If you want to discuss a settlement, it should be through proper channels. He laughed shortly. I'm not interested in proper channels at this point. I'm interested in damage control. Rachel told you about Andrew's activities. She made some allegations, yes. They're not allegations. Charlotte, they're facts. Andrew was washing money for the Torino crime family for at least a decade. I have documentation proving it, documentation I'm prepared to turn over to the FBI unless we can come to an arrangement. Harrison's eyes widened, but he motioned for me to continue. What kind of arrangement? I asked, heart pounding. Simple. Drop the charges against Rachel and me. We'll sign whatever you want regarding the inheritance. You keep the house and $15 million. The rest goes to us. Clean and clear. Everyone walks away. Andrew's reputation remains intact, and Rachel and I don't go to prison. It was blackmail, pure and simple, but was it based on truth or fabrication? I'll need to discuss this with my attorney, I said carefully. You have 24 hours, Marcus replied. After that, the documents go to the FBI, and everyone loses. Think carefully. Charlotte, this isn't just about money anymore. After he hung up, Harrison and I sat in stunned silence. Do you think he's bluffing? I finally asked. Harrison ran a hand through his silver hair. I don't know. Andrew never gave me any reason to suspect illegal activity. But he was intensely private about certain clients. Said it was better for me not to know the details. Harrison looked troubled. We need to find out what Marcus has, and we need to do it quickly. How? I think it's time we had a serious conversation with the FBI, Harrison said grimly. But first, let's see what Carol Chen has discovered about Andrew's finances. Carol Chen arrived at Harrison's office an hour later, carrying a laptop and several thick folders. The financial investigator had been working around the clock since we discovered Rachel's fraud, tracking every transaction in Andrew's complex financial portfolio. I found something, she said without preamble, setting her materials on Harrison's conference table. Several somethings, actually, and none of them good. My stomach tightened. About Andrew's finances. She nodded, her expression grave. There are definite irregularities in his accounts going back at least 12 years. Large cash deposits followed by complex series of transfers through multiple shell companies. Classic money laundering patterns. The room seemed to tilt sideways. Andrew, my Andrew, laundering money for criminals. It couldn't be true. There must be some explanation, I said weakly. There may be, Carol acknowledged. But the patterns are concerning. What's more troubling is that these transactions increased significantly in the 6 months before his death. Harrison frowned. The same time frame in which he updated his will to protect Charlotte from Rachel. Exactly, Carol said. It's as if he knew something was coming and was preparing for it. Or as if he knew he was dying and was trying to secure his family's future, I suggested, clinging to the belief that Andrew couldn't have been a criminal. Carol opened one of her folders, spreading documents across the table. These are the companies involved in the suspicious transactions. On paper, they're consulting firms, investment vehicles, real estate holdings, all perfectly legitimate. But when you follow the money, she traced a complex diagram with her finger. It all leads back to entities associated with the Torino family. Harrison looked as shocked as I felt. I handled some of Andrew's corporate formations, but I had no idea they were connected to the Torinos. Most people wouldn't, Carol said. The connections are buried under layers of legal entities. You'd only spot it if you were specifically looking for it, or if you already knew what to look for, like Marcus apparently did. I tried to process this information. My husband of 43 years, the ethical, principled man I thought I knew, had been laundering money for a crime family. It was incomprehensible. What does this mean for the inheritance? I asked, trying to focus on practical matters when everything else seemed to be crumbling. Carol's expression was sympathetic, but direct. If the FBI investigates and confirms these connections, they could potentially seize everything as proceeds of criminal activity. Everything, I whispered. The house, too. Potentially. Yes. It would depend on whether they could prove the house was purchased with tainted funds. Harrison reached over to squeeze my hand. Charlotte, we need to think carefully about our next steps. If Marcus goes to the FBI with this information, we could lose everything. But if we accept his offer, we become complicit in covering up criminal activity. I finished for him. And Rachel and Marcus walk away without consequences. There's another possibility, Carol said, tapping her pen against the table thoughtfully. We go to the FBI first. Voluntary disclosure often leads to more lenient treatment. But we'd still lose most of the money, Harrison pointed out. Maybe, maybe not, Carol replied. It depends on what Andrew's actual role was, how much he knew, and whether he was already cooperating with authorities in some capacity. The thought hit me like a thunderbolt. Cooperating with authorities. You mean, like an informant? Carol nodded. It's not unheard of for lawyers to become informants, especially when they find themselves unwittingly involved with criminal organizations. It would explain the increased activity before his death. He might have been gathering evidence. For the first time since this new revelation, I felt a glimmer of hope. It would make sense Andrew using his position to help bring down criminals, rather than simply profiting from them. It aligned with the man I thought I knew. How do we find out? I asked. We talked to the FBI, Harrison said decisively. Today, before Marcus makes his move. Carol began gathering her materials. I'll prepare a complete briefing packet for them. Everything I've found, organized clearly. As she worked, my phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Have you thought about our offer? Time is running out. I showed it to Harrison, who frowned. They're getting nervous. That's good. It means they haven't gone to the authorities yet. They're still hoping for a deal. Or it means they've already made their move and are trying to pressure us, I countered. Either way, we need to act quickly, Harrison said, already dialing a number on his phone. I have a contact at the FBI's white-collar crime division. Let's see if she can meet us today. As Harrison spoke in low tones with his FBI contact, I wandered to the window, looking out at the city skyline. Everything I thought I knew about my life with Andrew was being called into question. Had he been living a double life all these years? Had the money that paid for our comfortable existence, Rachel's expensive education, our vacations and luxuries, had it all been dirty money? And if it was, what did that make me? Charlotte, Harrison called, interrupting my thoughts. Agent Sarah Martinez can see us at 2 o'clock. That gives Carol time to finish her report and us time to prepare. I nodded, taking a deep breath. Then let's be prepared. The FBI field office was an imposing building of glass and steel in the downtown government complex. Harrison, Carol, and I were escorted through security and into a sterile conference room where Agent Sarah Martinez waited. She was younger than I expected, perhaps in her early 40s, with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "Mr. Porter," she greeted Harrison with a handshake. "It's been a while." "Too long, Sarah," Harrison replied. "Thank you for seeing us on such short notice." She turned to me, her expression softening slightly. "Mrs. Banks, I'm sorry for your recent losses, both your husband and, it seems, your trust in your daughter." "Thank you," I said, surprised by her empathy. "Agent Martinez and I worked together on a securities fraud case about 5 years ago," Harrison explained as we took our seats. "She's one of the best." Agent Martinez accepted the compliment with a nod. "Now, I understand you have information regarding potential money laundering through Andrew Banks's law practice." For the next hour, Carol laid out her findings in methodical detail. Agent Martinez listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly taking notes on a legal pad. I watched her face for reactions, but she maintained a professional neutrality throughout. When Carol finished, Agent Martinez set down her pen and looked at me directly. "Mrs. Banks, what do you know about your husband's business dealings with the Torino family?" "Nothing," I said truthfully. "Until today, I didn't even know there was a connection." "And your daughter and son-in-law, when did they discover this information?" "According to them, after Andrew's death," Harrison answered. "They're now attempting to use this information as leverage to avoid fraud charges." Agent Martinez's eyes narrowed. "Blackmail on top of fraud. Charming." "What happens now?" I asked, dreading the answer. Agent Martinez leaned back in her chair, considering. "Normally, in a case like this, we'd open a full investigation, freeze all assets pending the outcome. But," she hesitated, glancing at the files Carol had provided, "there's something about this that doesn't quite add up." "What do you mean?" Harrison asked. "These patterns." Agent Martinez pointed to several transaction records. "They're almost too perfect, too obvious to someone who knows what to look for." Carol nodded slowly. "I had the same thought. It's as if they were designed to be found, if you knew where to look." "Mrs. Banks," Agent Martinez said, turning to me, "did your husband ever mention working with federal authorities in any capacity?" My heart raced. "No." But there was a letter. I reached into my purse, pulling out Andrew's sealed letter, the one I'd found in his desk. He wrote this 6 months before his death. It mentions enemies and being careful who I trust, even family. Agent Martinez read the letter carefully, then set it down with a thoughtful expression. "Mrs. Banks, I think it's time I told you something about your husband, something that's been classified until now." The room went silent as Agent Martinez reached for her phone, dialed a number, and spoke briefly to someone, requesting authorization for disclosure of sensitive information. After a moment, she nodded and hung up. "Charlotte," she said, using my first name for the first time. "Your husband was not laundering money for the Torino family. He was helping us build a case against them." The world seemed to stop. "What Andrew Banks was a confidential informant for the FBI for the past 12 years. The transactions your financial investigator found were part of a carefully orchestrated operation to gather evidence against one of the most sophisticated money laundering networks in the country." Tears filled my eyes, tears of relief, of vindication. "He was working for you," Agent Martinez nodded. "He came to us after he realized some of his clients were using his firm to wash illegal funds. Rather than simply walking away, he offered to help us track and document the operation from the inside. It was dangerous, meticulous work, and he was one of our most valuable assets." "Why didn't he tell me?" I whispered. "For your protection." Agent Martinez explained gently. "The less you knew, the safer you were. If the Torinos had ever suspected his cooperation, they wouldn't have hesitated to use you as leverage against him." Harrison looked stunned. "I worked with him for 30 years. I had no idea. That was the point, Agent Martinez said. Andrew compartmentalized his life completely. Only 3 people in our division knew of his involvement, and all communication was handled through secure channels. What about the money? Carol asked. Professional, even in the midst of this revelation. If it was part of a money laundering operation, even one sanctioned by the FBI. The money is clean, Agent Martinez assured us. Andrew was authorized to maintain his normal fee structure to avoid suspicion. Additionally, he received compensation for his cooperation and the considerable risks he took. Every dollar in his estate has been vetted and cleared by our financial crimes unit. I felt lightheaded with relief. Not only was Andrew not a criminal, he was a hero, a man who had risked everything to do the right thing. Does this mean my inheritance is safe? I asked. Completely, Agent Martinez confirmed. In fact, the FBI considers Andrew Banks a hero. His work led to dozens of arrests and the seizure of over $200 million in criminal assets. I thought of Rachel and Marcus, so confident in their leverage, unaware that they were threatening to expose something that would only enhance Andrew's legacy rather than destroy it. What about my daughter? I asked. She and her husband are threatening to go to the FBI with evidence of Andrew's criminal activities. Agent Martinez smiled for the first time, a predatory grin that held no warmth. I think it's time we had a conversation with Rachel and Marcus Williams. Don't you? Let's see how they react when they learn their blackmail attempt is about to backfire spectacularly. As we left the FBI office, I felt a strange mix of emotions: grief for the secrets Andrew had kept, pride in the man he truly was, and a grim satisfaction knowing that Rachel and Marcus's final play was about to collapse. I never knew, I said softly to Harrison as we walked to the car. All those years, he was risking his life, and I never knew. Harrison squeezed my shoulder gently. He was protecting you, Charlotte. That's what love looks like sometimes, not grand gestures, but quiet sacrifice. My phone buzzed with another text from Rachel. Final offer. Meeting tomorrow. 10 a.m. Your house. Yes or no, I showed it to Harrison, who exchanged a look with Agent Martinez. Tell her yes, Agent Martinez said, a glint of anticipation in her eyes. We'll be ready for them. As I typed my response, I realized that this wasn't just about money anymore, or even justice. It was about truth, the truth about Andrew, about Rachel, about the life I'd lived without fully understanding. Tomorrow, all those truths would finally come to light. Yes, I texted back. 10 a.m., we have much to discuss. The morning of the meeting, my house transformed into an operational command center. Agent Sarah Martinez arrived with 2 additional FBI agents who discreetly set up recording equipment in the living room. Harrison Porter reviewed our strategy one last time while Michael Dawson prepared the legal documents. We hoped Rachel and Marcus would sign full confessions in exchange for reduced charges. Remember, Agent Martinez instructed as she adjusted a small microphone under my sweater. We need them to explicitly admit to the forgery and fraud. Get them to confirm they knew the documents were fake and that they deliberately misrepresented your husband's will. I nodded, my mouth dry with anticipation. What if they don't admit it? They will, Harrison said confidently. They think they're coming here to blackmail you. People reveal a lot when they believe they have the upper hand. At precisely 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and opened the door to find Rachel and Marcus standing on the porch. Rachel looked nervous, fidgeting with the strap of her designer purse. Marcus, by contrast, appeared smugly confident, briefcase in hand. Mom, Rachel greeted me with a stiff nod. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Come in, I said, stepping aside. Let's get this over with. They followed me to the living room, where Harrison waited by the fireplace. Rachel faltered slightly at the sight of him. I thought we agreed no lawyers, she said accusingly. I never agreed to that, I replied calmly. Harrison stays. Marcus shrugged. It doesn't matter. Our offer stands regardless of who's in the room. They settled on the sofa while I took Andrew's favorite armchair, a deliberate choice that wasn't lost on Rachel, whose eyes flickered with irritation. So, I began, you claim to have evidence that Andrew was laundering money for criminals. and you want me to drop the charges against you in exchange for your silence." Marcus opened his briefcase, removing a folder of documents. "Not just claims. Charlotte, proof. Your husband was neck-deep in the Torino family's financial operations for over a decade." He spread several papers on the coffee table. Bank statements, transfer records, correspondence all connecting Andrew Banks to one of the most notorious crime families in the country. I examined the documents, recognizing some of the transaction records Carol Chen had identified. They certainly looked damning to the untrained eye. "And what exactly do you want in exchange for not taking these to the FBI?" Harrison asked, playing his part perfectly. "Simple," Marcus replied. "Charlotte drops all charges against us. We split the inheritance 50-50, 15 million each. Plus Rachel gets her original 10 million trust restored. Charlotte keeps the house." "And if I refuse?" I asked. Rachel leaned forward. "Mom, please understand we're trying to protect you. If the FBI investigates Dad's finances, they'll freeze everything. You could lose the house, all the money. You could even face charges yourself as an accessory." "Accessory," I repeated incredulously. "I knew nothing about any of this." "Ignorance isn't a defense," Marcus said with a dismissive wave. "You benefited from the proceeds of criminal activity for years. The cars, the vacations, this house all paid for with dirty money." I let his words hang in the air for a moment, watching Rachel's face. She was struggling to maintain her composure, clearly uncomfortable with the direct accusation. "When did you discover this alleged criminal activity?" I asked. "Right after the funeral," Rachel said quickly. "Marcus was helping me organize Dad's papers, and he noticed some inconsistencies in the accounts. And instead of reporting these inconsistencies to the authorities, you decided to forge documents and steal my inheritance." I kept my voice calm, inviting confession. Marcus shifted slightly. "We needed to move quickly, before anyone else noticed. The plan was to transfer the assets to offshore accounts, then redistribute them through legitimate investments. Clean the money, essentially." "So you admit the documents you showed me were forged?" I pressed. "Obviously." Marcus scoffed. "We needed control of the assets immediately. There wasn't time for legal niceties." Harrison caught my eye. We had the admission we needed. Now to push for more. "And throwing me out of my home with 200 to my name, was that also part of your protection plan?" I asked Rachel directly. She had the grace to look ashamed. "That was a mistake. We panicked. Things got out of hand." "Out of hand," I repeated. "You told me to find somewhere else to die, that I was useless now. Those were your exact words." Rachel, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Mom. I was stressed and scared. Marcus said we needed to act decisively." "Don't put this on me," Marcus snapped. "You were fully on board with the plan." "I never wanted to hurt Mom," Rachel protested. "I just wanted to protect our family's money." "Your family's money," Marcus corrected sharply. "Your inheritance." I watched their unity crumbling in real time. This was what Agent Martinez had predicted under pressure. They'd turn on each other. "So let me summarize," Harrison interjected smoothly. "You discovered what you believed was evidence of money laundering. Instead of reporting it, you forged legal documents to gain control of the assets. You evicted Charlotte from her home with minimal resources, and now you're attempting to blackmail her to avoid the consequences of your actions." "It sounds bad when you put it like that," Marcus admitted. "But we had good intentions." "Good intentions." I couldn't contain my disbelief. "You were willing to destroy your father's reputation to save yourselves. How is that good intentions?" "Andrew's reputation is already destroyed in the files I have," Marcus retorted, tapping the documents on the table. "At least this way. The family keeps the money." Rachel suddenly seemed to notice something off about the conversation. "Why are you so calm? Mom, aren't you worried about what happens if these documents go public?" Before I could answer, the door to the study opened, and Agent Martinez walked in, badge in hand. The two other FBI agents emerged from the kitchen. "Rachel and Marcus Williams," Agent Martinez announced formally. "I'm Special Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI's White Collar Crime Division. I've been listening to your conversation, and I have some news that might interest you." The color drained from Marcus's face. Rachel gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "First," Agent Martinez continued, You should know that everything you've said has been recorded and will be used as evidence in your fraud and blackmail case. She picked up the documents Marcus had brought. Second, the FBI is already intimately familiar with these transactions. You've been investigating Andrew Banks, Marcus stuttered, looking frantically between the agents. Agent Martinez smiled coldly. No, Mr. Williams, Andrew Banks was investigating for us. He was a confidential informant for the FBI for 12 years, helping us build cases against the Torino crime family. Every transaction in these documents was sanctioned and monitored by federal authorities. The silence that followed was absolute. Rachel stared at Agent Martinez in shock, while Marcus seemed to physically deflate, sinking back into the sofa as the implications hit him. That's impossible, he finally managed. Andrew was working for them. I saw the payments, the correspondence. What you saw was a carefully constructed cover, Agent Martinez explained. Your father-in-law was one of our most valuable assets in bringing down a major money laundering operation. The money in his estate was his compensation for years of dangerous undercover work, all of it completely legal and clean. Rachel turned to me, her expression a mix of disbelief and dawning horror. Dad was a hero. Yes, I said simply. While you were planning to destroy his legacy to save yourselves, you had no idea who he really was. Marcus made a sudden move toward his briefcase, but one of the FBI agents stepped forward, blocking his path. If you're thinking of destroying evidence, Mr. Williams, I wouldn't advise it, the agent said quietly. That would just add obstruction of justice to your growing list of charges. This is a mistake, Marcus insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. I'm an investment banker. I was just trying to protect family assets by committing fraud, elder abuse, and attempted blackmail. Agent Martinez raised an eyebrow. Interesting protection strategy. What happens now? Rachel asked, her voice small. Harrison cleared his throat. We've prepared an agreement. You both signed full confessions, make complete restitution for any funds already spent, and plead guilty to reduced charges. And if we refuse, Marcus challenged, though his bravado was clearly fading, then we proceed with the full range of charges, Agent Martinez said matter-of-factly. Fraud, elder abuse, blackmail, attempted extortion of a federal witness that's just for starters. You're looking at 10-15 years. Mr. Williams, Marcus paled. I want to call my lawyer. Of course, Agent Martinez gestured to one of her colleagues, who handed Marcus a phone. While Marcus stepped into the hallway to make his call, Rachel remained on the sofa, looking utterly lost. Tears streamed down her face as she stared at the floor. I didn't know, she whispered. About Dad. I really thought... You thought he was a criminal, I finished for her. And you were willing to use that against me rather than protect his memory. She looked up, her makeup streaked with tears. I was wrong, Mom. So wrong. About everything. I wanted to comfort her. The maternal instinct doesn't simply vanish, even in the face of betrayal. But the wound was still too fresh, the hurt too deep. Yes, I agreed quietly. You were, Marcus returned, his face grim. My attorney says we should cooperate fully. Smart advice, Harrison commented, pushing the confession documents across the table. These specify exactly what you're admitting to and the penalties you'll face. For the next hour, Harrison and Agent Martinez walked Rachel and Marcus through their confessions, ensuring every detail was covered and every admission properly documented. I watched silently, feeling strangely detached from the proceedings. This wasn't a victory, not really. There was no joy in seeing my daughter's life implode, even if she had brought it on herself. When the documents were finally signed, Agent Martinez nodded to her colleagues. Rachel and Marcus Williams, you're under arrest for fraud, attempted blackmail, and elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent. As the agents led them away, Rachel looked back at me one last time. I'm sorry, Mom, she said, her voice breaking. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not sure I deserve it. I couldn't answer. What was there to say that I still loved her? Despite everything, that perhaps someday we might find a way back to each other. I wasn't sure if any of that was true anymore, after they were gone. Harrison squeezed my shoulder gently. You did well, Charlotte. Andrew would be proud. I nodded, too emotionally drained to speak. The house felt unnaturally quiet after the morning's drama. Empty, like my heart. What happens now? I asked finally. Now, Harrison said. You rebuild, one day at a time. The following week, I found myself back at the FBI field office, this time for a different purpose. Agent Martinez had requested a formal meeting to discuss Andrew's work and to return some of his personal effects that had been held as evidence. The conference room was the same, but the atmosphere was entirely different. Instead of tension and uncertainty, there was a sense of closure, of secrets finally coming to light. Mrs. Banks, Agent Martinez greeted me warmly. Thank you for coming. I thought you might appreciate learning more about your husband's contributions now that the case is no longer classified. She placed a box on the table between us. These are some of Andrew's personal items that were kept in our secure evidence facility. Notes, recordings, some photographs, all part of his work with us. I opened the box with trembling hands, finding a small leather journal with Andrew's familiar handwriting. Flipping through it, I saw coded entries, dates, amounts, the careful documentation of a man leading a double life for the greater good. He never told me, I said softly. All those years, and I never suspected a thing. Agent Martinez nodded sympathetically. That was by design. Andrew was exceptionally good at compartmentalizing. He said it was the only way he could protect you, by keeping you entirely separate from that part of his life. Did he ever consider telling me? Many times, she said, pulling out a sealed envelope from the box. In fact, he left this for you, to be delivered if anything happened to him before the operation concluded. I think you should read it. The envelope bore my name in Andrew's precise handwriting. I opened it carefully, unfolding several pages of his distinctive stationery. My dearest Charlotte, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and Agent Martinez has deemed it safe to finally tell you the truth. I've rehearsed this letter in my mind 1,000 times, trying to find the right words to explain the double life I've been leading. 12 years ago, I discovered that some of my most lucrative clients were using my firm to launder money for the Torino crime family. I could have simply withdrawn from representing them, reported what I knew, and walked away. Many would say that was my ethical obligation as an attorney. But I saw an opportunity to do more to help bring down an organization that had destroyed countless lives through their criminal enterprises. When the FBI approached me, I agreed to continue representing these clients while secretly gathering evidence against them. It was dangerous work. Charlotte, these people wouldn't have hesitated to hurt you to get to me if they'd discovered my cooperation. That's why I never told you. Every time I considered bringing you into my confidence, I imagined you in danger, and I couldn't bear it. So I created a wall between my two lives. The man you knew, the husband, the father, the corporate attorney that was the real me. The other part, the informant, was a role I played, a necessary deception for a greater purpose. I know you must feel betrayed finding this out after I'm gone. I can only hope you understand that everything I did out of love for you, for Rachel, for the principles I believed in. The money I've left you is clean, Charlotte. Every dollar was vetted by the FBI and represents either my legitimate earnings or my compensation for the risks I took. You can use it without fear or guilt. As for Rachel, I've watched her changing over the years, becoming more materialistic, more entitled. I fear how she might react when she learns of my death and the inheritance. That's why I structured the will as I did, with protections for you built in. Harrison has all the details. I hope you can forgive me for the secrets I kept. Know that in a life with many regrets, loving you was never one of them. Always and forever yours. Andrew, tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. All these years, I'd thought I knew my husband completely, only to discover there were depths to him I'd never imagined. He was an extraordinary man, Agent Martinez said quietly. His work saved lives and brought down criminals who thought they were untouchable. Why didn't you contact me after his death? I asked. Why let me find out this way? The operation was still active, she explained. We couldn't risk exposure until certain arrests were made. Then, When we learned about Rachel and Marcus's fraud, we had to move carefully to avoid tipping them off. She paused. I'm sorry for the pain that caused you. I nodded, understanding the necessities even as I mourned the lost opportunity to know my husband fully while he lived. There's one more thing, Agent Martinez added, pulling out a final document. The Bureau would like to formally recognize Andrew's service. It won't be public, his role will remain classified for security reasons, but we're establishing a scholarship in his name for law students interested in financial crimes prosecution. With your permission, of course. The gesture touched me deeply. He would have liked that, I said. Andrew always believed in nurturing new talent. As I left the FBI office that afternoon, carrying the box of Andrew's secret life, I felt a strange mix of grief and pride. The man I'd loved had been even more extraordinary than I'd known, brave enough to risk everything for justice, loving enough to protect me from that risk. The question now was what to do with the rest of my life, a life suddenly defined not just by loss, but by revelations and possibilities I'd never imagined. 3 months passed. Rachel and Marcus accepted plea deals that included restitution, community service, and in Marcus's case, 18 months in a minimum security prison. Rachel received a suspended sentence due to her cooperation and her role as primary caregiver to Emma and Liam. I hadn't spoken to her since the day of the arrest. She'd called numerous times, left voicemails full of tears and apologies, sent letters that remained unopened on my desk. I wasn't ready. Perhaps I never would be. Harrison had helped me reorganize my finances, establish a proper investment strategy, and create a foundation in Andrew's name to support victims of financial crimes. The Charlotte and Andrew Banks Foundation quickly gained recognition for its work, providing legal assistance to elderly victims of fraud and abuse. The house no longer felt empty. I'd redecorated, removing the heavy masculine furniture Andrew had preferred, and creating spaces that reflected my own tastes' lighter colors, more comfortable seating, walls filled with the art I'd always admired but never purchased because it didn't fit Andrew's aesthetic. In the master bedroom, I'd established a small memorial, a photograph of Andrew in his prime, his favorite fountain pen, the watch I'd given him for our 30th anniversary. Not a shrine, but an acknowledgement of the man who had shared my life for so long. The study had undergone the most dramatic transformation. Once Andrew's domain of dark wood and leather, it was now my art studio, filled with light from enlarged windows and the creative chaos of my rediscovered passion for painting. I'd taken classes, joined a group of local artists, found a community I'd never known existed while I was busy being just the wife. It was in this bright, paint-scented room that I received the unexpected visitor who would change everything once again. The doorbell rang on a sunny Tuesday afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole to see a young girl of about 8 standing on my porch, shifting nervously from foot to foot. Emma, my granddaughter. I opened the door, heart pounding. Emma, what are you doing here? Is everything all right? Her small face was solemn, her dark hair, so like Rachel's, pulled back in a neat ponytail. Hi, Grandma, can I come in? Of course, sweetheart. I ushered her inside, glancing toward the street. Is your mother with you? Emma shook her head. She's at home. She doesn't know I'm here. Alarm bells rang in my mind. How did you get here? I took the bus, she said proudly. I saved my allowance for the fare. Emma, that's dangerous. Your mother must be worried sick. She shrugged with the magnificent indifference of childhood. She thinks I'm at Sophie's house. I'll go there after. I led her to the kitchen, trying to decide whether to call Rachel immediately or hear what Emma had to say first. Curiosity won out. Would you like some juice? I offered, buying time to collect my thoughts. Yes, please. She climbed onto a stool at the counter, looking around with interest. You changed things. It looks nice. Thank you. I poured apple juice into a glass and placed it before her. Now, why don't you tell me why you're here? Emma took a small sip, then set the glass down carefully. Mom cries a lot, she said simply. At night, when she thinks we're asleep, she looks at old pictures and cries. My heart clenched. I'm sorry to hear that. She misses you, Emma continued. She talks to your picture sometimes, says she's sorry. I hadn't expected this, a child's unvarnished reporting of Rachel's private grief. Mom told us she did something really bad, and that's why she can't see you anymore, Emma said, her large eyes serious. She said she was greedy and selfish and hurt you, and now she has to live with the consequences, I supplied softly. Yeah, those, Emma nodded. She said Grandpa was a hero, and she tried to make him look bad, and that was the worst part. I sat beside her, unsure what to say. Emma solved the problem by continuing in her matter-of-fact way. Dad's in jail because he did bad things with money. Mom says he wanted more and more and never had enough, and he made her want that too. She looked at me directly. But she's different now. She got a job at the library. We don't have the big house anymore. We live in an apartment. Each revelation hit me like a small stone. Rachel working at a library, living in an apartment. It was difficult to imagine my status-conscious daughter embracing such a modest lifestyle. Mom's teaching me and Liam about money now, Emma continued. About how it's just a tool, not the most important thing. She says Grandpa knew that, and you know that. But she forgot it for a while. That sounds like a good lesson, I managed. Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I drew this for you, she said, pushing it across the counter. Mom doesn't know I made it. I unfolded the paper to find a childish drawing of 4 figures holding hands, a tall woman with gray hair, a woman with dark hair, and 2 smaller figures. Above them, floating in a cloud, was a man with a smile. Our family was written across the top in careful block letters. That's you, Emma pointed to the gray-haired figure. And Mom, and me and Liam, and that's Grandpa in heaven, watching over us. Tears welled in my eyes. It's beautiful, Emma. Thank you. Mom says we have to respect your decision if you don't want to see us again, she said earnestly. But I thought maybe you didn't know that she's really sorry. Like, for real sorry, not just saying sorry. Out of the mouths of babes, Emma had accomplished in 10 minutes what all of Rachel's calls and letters had failed to do. She'd reached past my anger to touch my heart. I think, I said carefully, that we should call your mother and let her know where you are. She must be worried. Emma's face fell. Are you mad at me for coming here? No, sweetheart, I assured her. I'm very glad you did. But we still need to call your mom. The call was brief and tense. Rachel alternated between relief that Emma was safe and horror that she'd taken a bus across town alone. She promised to come immediately to pick her up. While we waited, Emma gave me a tour of the house, noting all the changes with the frank assessment only children can offer. This is nicer, she declared in the living room, before it was too dark. In the studio, she gasped with delight at my paintings. You're an artist. That's so cool. When the doorbell rang 30 minutes later, Emma ran to answer it before I could stop her. I heard Rachel's voice, tight with emotion. Emma Banks Williams, you are in so much trouble. Do you have any idea how worried I was? I stepped into the hallway to see Rachel kneeling before Emma, checking her over as if expecting to find injuries from her unauthorized journey. She was thinner than I remembered. Her designer clothes replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail much like Emma's. When she saw me, she froze. Mom, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I had no idea she was coming here. It's all right, I said. She's fine. We've had a nice visit. Rachel stood slowly, keeping her distance as if afraid to presume too much. Thank you for calling me. I know you didn't have to. The awkward silence stretched between us. 3 generations of Banks women standing in a hallway filled with unspoken words. Emma broke the tension. Grandma's an artist now, she announced. She has a whole room of paintings, and she liked my drawing of our family. Rachel's eyes flickered to mine, questioning. I nodded slightly. Emma, why don't you go look at the garden for a few minutes? I suggested. Your mother and I need to talk. Once Emma was outside, Rachel and I moved to the living room, sitting on opposite ends of the sofa like cautious strangers. She misses you, Rachel said quietly. Both kids do. They ask about you all the time. And what do you tell them? The truth, that I did something terrible. And you need time to decide if you can forgive me. She twisted her hands in her lap. I've been in therapy, trying to understand why I became so obsessed with money and status. Why I was willing to hurt you. To betray Dad's memory. I said nothing. Waiting. The therapist says I was trying to fill something empty inside me. That I thought wealth and position would make me feel worthy. She gave a sad laugh. Turns out when you lose everything, you find out what actually matters. And what's that? I asked, genuinely curious. Family, she said simply. The people who love you even when you don't deserve it. The things money can't buy: trust, respect, integrity. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. All the things I threw away. I studied my daughter's face, searching for the manipulative woman who had thrown me out of my home. Instead, I saw someone humbled, genuinely changed by consequence. Marcus taught me to value all the wrong things, she continued. Or maybe I taught myself, and he just encouraged it. Either way, I was wrong. So terribly wrong. The children seem well, I offered, a small olive branch. Rachel nodded. They're resilient. We talk about everything now, why their dad is away, why we moved, why money isn't as important as character. I'm trying to give them what you and Dad gave me, before I lost my way. And the library job. A flush of pride crossed her face. Children's department. I read stories twice a week and help with the summer reading program. The pay is nothing, but, she smiled slightly, I love it. For the first time in my life, I'm doing something that matters. I thought of Andrew's letter, his concerns about Rachel's materialism and entitlement. Would he recognize this woman before me now? I don't expect forgiveness, Rachel said softly. I just want you to know that I understand now what I destroyed, and I'm trying to rebuild myself into someone who deserves to be your daughter again. The wall I'd built around my heart since her betrayal began to crack. Just slightly. Not enough to let her in fully, that would take much longer, if it ever happened, but enough to let some light through. Emma's drawing, I said finally. The one of our family. I'd like to frame it. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. She'd like that. Perhaps, I said carefully. The children could visit sometimes, maybe once a week for dinner. They'd love that, Rachel whispered. And so would I, if I'm included in the invitation. Was I ready for that? To sit across the table from the daughter who had wounded me so deeply I thought of Andrew, of the forgiveness I wished I could offer him for his necessary deceptions, of Emma's innocent drawing of a family still connected despite everything. We'll start with dinner, I said. Once a week. We'll see where it goes from there. Rachel nodded, wiping away tears. That's more than I deserve. Thank you. As she called Emma in from the garden, I realized something important. Forgiveness wasn't a single act, but a process. A path we walk one step at a time. Rachel and I were taking the first step today. Where the path led ultimately, only time would tell. 6 months later, I stood in my art studio, putting the finishing touches on a painting that had taken weeks to complete. It was a family portrait Andrew from an old photograph. Myself as I was now. Rachel with the children. Not idealized. Not perfect. But real, each face bearing the marks of our shared history. The losses and betrayals. The tentative steps toward reconciliation. The weekly dinners had evolved into a new tradition. Rachel and the children came every Sunday. Sometimes we cooked together. Sometimes we ordered in. But always we talked, really talked about our lives, our feelings, the past we were slowly coming to terms with. Rachel had been promoted at the library, taking charge of community outreach programs. She'd discovered a talent for connecting with underprivileged children, using her experiences to teach them about integrity and resilience. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, my daughter. Once consumed by materialism, now teaching others about values beyond wealth. Marcus remained in prison, with another year to serve. Rachel visited him monthly, alone. The children wrote letters but hadn't seen him since his sentencing. They'll decide when they're older if they want a relationship with him, Rachel had explained. I won't force it either way. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I set down my paintbrush and went to answer it, finding Emma and Liam on the porch, Rachel behind them with a grocery bag. "We're early," Emma announced. "Mom said we could help you make cookies before dinner." "Did she now?" I smiled at my granddaughter, now 9 and increasingly confident. "Well, I suppose we'd better get started then." As we baked in the kitchen flour-dusting countertops, chocolate chips disappearing into small mouths, I marveled at how much had changed in a single year. From grieving widow to homeless senior to wealthy heiress to something entirely new. A woman defined not by her relationship to others, but by her own choices and creations. Later, after the children were occupied with a movie in the living room, Rachel helped me clean up the kitchen. "I saw the painting in your studio," she said quietly. "The family portrait." I nodded, slightly embarrassed that she'd seen the unfinished work. "It's not quite done. It's beautiful, Mom. The way you've captured Dad, it's like he's really there, watching over us. That's how I feel sometimes," I admitted. "Like he's still here, seeing how we're all finding our way without him." Rachel was quiet for a moment, wiping a plate with careful attention. "Do you think he'd be proud of how we're healing?" I considered the question, thinking of Andrew's letter, his hopes and fears for our daughter. "Yes," I said finally. "I think he'd be very proud." She smiled, blinking back tears. "I hope so." As we joined the children in the living room, I looked around at this fragile new family we were building, not perfect, not unmarked by pain, but real and present and trying. Andrew had given me many gifts in our years together, but perhaps the greatest was this, the chance to discover who Charlotte Banks truly was, beyond wife, beyond mother, beyond victim or victor. I was still discovering the answer. One day, one painting, one Sunday dinner at a time. And for the first time in my life, the journey itself felt like enough. If you've stayed with my story until the end, thank you. I hope it's shown you that it's never too late to reinvent yourself, to find strength you didn't know you had, to rebuild what was broken. And remember, sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't money or property, but the truth about who you are and what you're capable of becoming. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? Your stories matter too.